Welcome to the Catalyst Sale Podcast. Many of us struggle with sales. This could be due to a lack of confidence, comfort, just not wanting to be salesy. We want to help our customers. We know we can. We complicate the process. This podcast is designed to help folks like you improve its sales through process, practice, framework, and thinking. This is Mike Simmons. I'm the founder of Catalyst Sale, and I'm really excited to have Erik Kostelnik on the podcast. Erik is the founder and CEO of Postal.io. He's gone through a number of exits, has built large organizations. And today we're going to get into some details, a really deep dive into lessons learned, things that he considers, questions that he considers when thinking about solving problems, working toward execution, and building out your business. Erik, thanks for joining me today. Erik, thanks for joining me on the podcast today.
Hey, I appreciate it. It's great to be here.
So I don't know how many people out there are familiar with you and your work. Can you give everybody just a high-level background on Postal and what you're doing?
Yeah, so we are a sales engagement platform that leverages direct mail and gifting to help increase leads, move meetings forward, and retain customers. We've also started being used in employee engagement as the world has become remote. So a lot of companies are looking, hey, how can we engage our employees that are not in the office? But ultimately, we're helping companies create longing connections with their customers.
And it's an awesome time for this because so many people are looking for ways to engage with customers. And I think it's cool that you're talking about doing this both on an internal customer side of things and an external customer side of things as we look to drive better engagement inside organizations. Why do people struggle with engagement?
Well, number one, the last 20 years has been totally focused on the digital world. And so if you think about just all the technology and massive infrastructure that's been built, it has everything to do with how do you engage people in the digital. And I think that has now reached critical mass based on the number of business emails that are flying across on a daily basis. We're averaging around 124 billion business emails a day, by the way, that are going across the web. So for me, it had everything to do with taking a step back and taking a look at, hey, actually, what does this customer journey look like? And where are the things that are missing that technology could solve for? And for me, it had everything to do with how do you create the connections that you want to make that you do through either direct mail or handwritten notes or gift cards or your swag closet or whatever else. And actually, how do you build a system that can automate and manage that just as well as your marketing automation software or your sales engagement software? And that's where the idea of Postal came about. We just didn't see a lot of superior technology that was trying to solve that problem. And that's a massive, massive problem. There's 45 million people that can use a software like ours just in the B2B space. So we are trying to solve that, and we're trying to basically build the next Marketo for the offline world.
It's kind of interesting, really interesting when you talk about just how things have evolved over the last couple of months and how so much is happening in our homes now. So we've gone through from this period where you could send something into an organization, and if you give it enough time, it will likely make it to the right person, whether that ends up being through interoffice mail or some other vehicle, but it can get from one place to another. Now we've got everybody at home, or we've got so many people that are working from home. How have things changed inside the business in this operating environment? Are people seeing a higher, I know you mentioned the internal engagement, but are you seeing from an external engagement, are you seeing higher levels of adoption, higher levels of interest, better questions that are coming to you about how they can be doing things differently and thinking differently about the way they work with customers?
Yeah, I think everybody is trying to navigate the new normal, and whether the new normal is going to be the new normal for the next 12 months or 3 months, who knows what it's going to be. But the reality is that companies have to be agile. They have to figure out how to operate in this. So, part of that is actually the logistical problem of knowing where people are and then getting that marketing closet items into the hands of these individuals. And you can solve that through different integrations that we have set up with partners that can provide home address, as well as leverage actually email within the workflow of sending those items to gather email or to gather physical address locations, which we call address refresh. So that being said, it's more important than ever today to understand, okay, my past process was getting these items, whether it be a handwritten note, and from a rep, or maybe a letter from the CEO for new clients, or maybe a bottle of wine once a customer comes on board. All those things used to be managed by the marketing team, and they manage the logistics. And now that we're in this world that They don't have access to that Marketing Closet. They don't have access to those resources that allowed them to do that. You need a platform to help manage all that in the cloud and give the ability to manage budget, and manage the infrastructure that it takes to actually, send these items. And that was a very big technical lift to try to bring the offline to the online. And for me, that was a very interesting problem to solve. And we launched the business during COVID. So, we've only been around for about four plus months now. Now, we have absolutely seen the scale that we wanted to, and we're actually pleasantly surprised to see how fast the business started scaling. So as much as we thought that this was going to be a hindrance to our business and ultimately, would impact our revenue targets, we've actually seen pretty dramatic increase in what those levels are and the achievement levels of those clients and that revenue. So I think we're in a good place to help customers with that. I think there's fear around like, oh, should I be sending this to someone's home? And there's a lot of questions around how do I get addresses? And I think, companies are still trying to navigate that. Hey, we're not going to have events. How do you do virtual events? And how do I bring that same kind of connection that I have at the booth actually to someone's home now or remote working space? And so we're helping our customers navigate that. And those are big questions. And especially when you think about the impact that offline engagement has in the sales cycle. I mean, we see at minimum 2x lift of your overall conversion rates when you add direct mail or gifting or experiences or swag into that workflow. And that's really where the big value of Postal is, of increasing that conversion rate. But customers really need to know how to manage this and ultimately how to operate in the new normal.
So you've mentioned you're solving for given problems a number of different times. And you've also mentioned a number of different problems that both continue to evolve and existed before launching the business. Can you talk through your approach to problem solving?
Yeah. So I guess the problem solving in general is, I think a main topic. Problem solving when you're starting a business is probably a better topic to understand from a problem solving perspective, I think, for your audience as well. So I'll take it down that route. When you start a business, this will be my fourth startup. So I have a little bit of experience in this. And luckily, the past startups have been quite successful. So, what my experience has led me to is that you go through very much like a 5-step process. The first step in the process is ideation, right? So you got this idea that you think either technology can solve or workflow can solve or, information can solve. And you have to understand what that addressable market is. You have to understand the problems that are in that, right? So, okay, I think these are the problems that I'm hearing from. You have to do a lot of research on that problem, which is step 2, right? So I got this thing. I think I can solve it. Research is number 2. So I got to do a bunch of research into that problem to really understand and 5 whys are the biggest thing that I follow of, and it's a Toyota manufacturing throwback of, what are actually the 5 whys in those challenges that I see? And are those challenges big enough for us to invest our resources and invest, venture capital money in trying to solve? And once you get that research and you can build a business plan, then really it is going out and building the initial MVP. So you hire your team, number 3 is build that MVP, launch the business and start building to solve for those problems. You can't just build for solve those problems that those customers have in a vacuum. You can't, meaning that you can't have you and your team solving the problems without, true customer engagement. And then after you've solved those problems, you move to 4, and that is understand what your KPIs are. Understanding, have I launched this business? Have I done something to get to a beta or an alpha that I can start seeing the movement and the solving of some of those challenges? And then once that has been confirmed or denied, sometimes you have to basically start at the beginning again. If those KPIs are showing that thing that you built, that you thought you had a solution for, that you thought there was a problem, aren't aligning, that is not going to be an investable business. And that is not going to be a scalable business. So there's no reason for you to spend the next 2 to 5 years on solving a problem or solving a problem in an industry where you don't think that there's scale and where you don't think you can build technology or have a solution around that. And then once you've proven that, then it's time to go raise capital and trying to figure out, okay, how can I build out this business and scale this business and ultimately build a big company? And that's the process that I took for Postal and Text Recruit as well. And I think that's boded well for us. And the key is you got to stay on the right path within that structure. And you also have to have people around you understanding where you're at within this path. And the people that you hire, you need to ensure that, they can follow that in their respective divisions as well to continue building, the solution.
And as you went through that, I mean, it's really good to hear kind of the root cause analysis component and then switching that on and saying, are these challenges important enough to invest time, energy, and resources? Really, do people care about solving the problem?
Yeah.
How do you avoid scope creep? That whole thing inside the organization where you get,
Sure.
And I've seen this, your sales rep is out there talking to customers, has a conversation, or learning professionals in there talking to their customers, and they say, I really need to see, I want an AR, VR solution inside this thing. Or if you could just make it so that I could put my logo on here, that would make things so much better. Or all of these items that come back in, and now they're new features or functionality that the field folks, the people who are out there talking to customers, are starting to ask for. How have you solved for avoiding scope creep and keeping that level of focus inside the organization?
So I welcome scope creep. And here's why I welcome it. I welcome it because generally when you have scope creep, that means, and by the way, it's not an individual scope creep. Generally, scope creep happens when you actually have some critical mass telling you to go in that direction.
Yep.
If you're not experiencing some sort of scope creep, you're not asking the right questions, or your solution is dead on right? I mean, those are the two reasons why you would either not have why you wouldn't have scope creep. It's like dead on right, or you've built, you have to go some direction. And so really it's measuring the amount of what we're hearing as far as the requests go. And this is really in product development, product scoping, all that stuff. At the beginning, like I said, your research, your ideation, and then your solution building. Once you start building that, obviously you can't build everything at once. You have to build for what you think the top 3 challenges are that you've identified, and you will build that product. And then you'll take that product to market and start pushing it. And then you'll start hearing what it's missing. And you really have to take a look at, is this a scalable solution on this problem they're still having that we're not solving for? And do I believe that there's additional market share that I can go capture by integrating this into the product? And then once you've gotten all that data and you've really researched that, right? Step 2 is it's really startup process again, right? So you research that, you have this problem, ideation, research, great. Do I want to build this or not? Well, let's figure out what it takes to build that, and then understand what resources it's going to take you, where it's going to take your product roadmap, and where it fits into the overall scope of the project that you're working on. And if you're able to do those things effectively, then at the end of the day, I have never experienced building something that our customers have asked for, that many customers have asked for, and have made our products more effective, that has been a bad scope creep.
Yep.
So I welcome that. Sometimes we say no. You have to say no in the case that, hey, we want to build VR into postal. Probably not going to be asked by everybody. And even if it was asked by, the challenge also is you might get asked by a $1 million client and you're ready to sign this $1 million deal. And sometimes money talks, and sometimes you have to do things that are a little bit outside of really where you want to go, but it will get you to a point to where, you'll have something like a major client on board, that it might be something a little bit more customized for them. So it really depends on where you're at from a business structure, from a life cycle standpoint too. In growth startup, you want to make sure that you're trying to go get those big deals and solving for scalable problems, scalable solutions for the scalable problems. So that being said, that's the way I look at problem solving, as well as just the overall scope creep side of things. But I welcome it.
Yeah, it's awesome perspective, because I've always looked at it as, hey, we want to avoid scope creep as we continue to focus and build and be intentional. However, would you reframe that around the idea of either we solved for it perfectly, which how many times does that happen?
Never.
Yeah. So yeah. we either solve for it perfectly or we miss something. Then you've got to say, okay, well, there's going to be scope creep. In fact, you should welcome scope creep. The next question is, how do I make decisions effectively? How do I decide what to do or what not to do? So is there something you can share around decision-making process or frameworks that you use to help inform decision-making?
Yeah. So we actually use a project management software that helps us really do our research and understand what are the kind of the top things that we're hearing from customers. So we use a software called Reich, which I led sales there for 2-3 years, and great software. It helps us get all the intake of what those customer requests are, and then prioritize those within our VP of product basically takes all those and says, okay, what do these look like are these being solved within our current roadmap, which is, our basically next 2 sprints? And then what does our future roadmap look like? And are these solving or in our future roadmap? And if they're not, then you look at these and you say, okay, from a prioritization standpoint, really, what is the revenue behind these? Is this going to drive more revenue? And for me, because I'm a sales CEO and I have a technical co-founder, everything has revolved around us driving more revenue. So that's the decision-making criteria number 1. If we do this, is it going to drive more money into the business? Is it going to drive more money from more customers in the business? Is it going to help us defend this product to our competitors? We never do anything that is quote unquote cool. I absolutely hate the statement like this would be a really cool thing to add. Dude, I'm not here to be cool. I'm here to make money. I'm here to get customers, and I'm here to build a business and influence community. That's what I want to do. I want to do that. I don't want to build cool stuff. And so I always try to help our employees and our customers understand that there's a lot of shiny lures out there that you'll see that are sparkling, but really, what is that going to do for you? Are they going to spend more money with us? Is it going to solve more problems if they do that? Sometimes it's just a cool thing. And that's actually what I look at AI being right now. You see a lot of companies with the shiny lure of AI attached to all their businesses, whether it be a software business, hardware business, whatever else. The reality is that these are not AI solutions. These are just shiny lures that they're throwing out there. And maybe there's components of NLP or, some, learning behavior recommendation engine that are built into these softwares, but is not true AI. So I look at making sure our customers understand, like, hey, what is true AI? And I'm going down this path, but what is true AI and what isn't? And what is just a shiny lure and what is cool and what is actual functional? And then, ultimately to our employees and investors, what should we be building based on what our revenue opportunity is? So
it's awesome to reinforce the importance of the questions that you ask inside the organization and how those can help inform and push forward an identity and inform and reinforce culture inside the organization. And you talked about it just from a decision-making framework perspective. You've got 2 categories. Is it going to drive revenue? Is it going to solve problems that we're currently struggling with? As we go back through this, you've reinforced the importance of problem solving. What problem are we solving for as a question throughout each of these individual levels and layers that we're going through? If you as a business professional out there, whether it's in learning or sales or wherever, are struggling with figuring out how the thing you do connects directly with the problem that you solve for in the marketplace, then ask somebody, like have a conversation with somebody inside the organization. Because it's amazing the number of times that alignment or things will get out of alignment. Folks will think from a product perspective, my job is to build cool things because the market's going to respond to cool things. No, it's not cool. It's not the shiny stuff. You mentioned an AI term, NLP, just for folks who are listening, natural language processing, just so that you're not having to go through and do a quick Google search while you're listening to this. Why is it that we get sucked into these lures? We see these shiny things. Why is it that we, as business professionals, as human beings, why is it that we get sucked in, or why do we want to go to the shiny stuff?
Because we're great marketers. Because honestly, these companies are incredible marketers. And I'll tell you, there is some really crappy product out there that has incredible marketing on it. And I won't name names, but I come across them every single day. And I go, God, these guys are marketing warriors, sales warriors. And they're able to fake it so good and fake it like to millions of dollars. I mean, tens of millions of dollars. I've seen companies with tens of millions of dollars of revenue, and you get into their product and you're like, how is this even a product? And how did they even get to where they're at? So that being said, there's incredible marketers out there. If you're on the buyer side, we've been talking a lot about like the seller side and building a company and selling. If you're on the buyer side, you're always influenced by the shiny lure and about the buzzwords that you hear out there. And very rarely do you find a tremendous amount of interest in like truly functional things, right? Very basic functional things. Like a good example is we want to take your marketing closet and put it in the cloud, right? Is that sexy? Is that like a term that you would use? Like, I mean, that's really what we're doing. We're taking your marketing closet, putting it in the cloud, and allowing your marketers and sales to access those at scale. very basic. That's not very flashy though. But when I say it's a machine learning algorithm that estimates when to send, what to send, who to send it to, understanding the timing of it, and setting up your integrations and triggers with your existing infrastructure to ensure that you're optimizing your funnel. It's the same thing. It's the same thing, right? And yes, we have all that stuff that I just said, but are people doing fact checks of what machine learning and algorithms are? No one has any idea. So, dude, I would just say great marketers do an amazing job at taking the very mundane and making it a very flashy thing to do. And we try to do the same thing as marketers when we're putting our content together. But ultimately, is the basis of what you're trying to solve for and what your solution has, is that a real problem, and does that scale? And a lot of times that's not flashy. So that's why you go with that flashiness.
Yeah, everybody wants more predictability in all the cool things that they do and know that they're spending money on the right things. And it's just giant game of jargon. I mean, I shared with you before we started recording that I was in the ed tech space, and the company I was with coined the phrase e-learning. At least that's what we said when we did it.
Nice.
Coined the phrase e-learning back in 2000. And then, then you move forward, and a number of years later, everything's you've got the iPhone and the iPad and everybody, but there's all these, I think if you go through this process and you just kind of deconstruct what Erik is saying, if you go back and follow the money along each of these things, you can start to figure out who's promoting what, why, where, when, and how. And then you just ask those general questions about how does it work? How will it actually impact my business? Where will I see this business impact? How are you different than others? Start asking some of these how questions. You can start to pull behind the covers and go behind the curtain and see the Wizard of Oz that's back there moving things around and shaking things together. We are a fascinating species.
100%. Yeah, we are. Yeah, we're creatures of habit too. So when we have a specific way that we evaluate software, when we have a pain, a lot of times, we'll go and search, and the shiny thing will attract us. And generally, that's really hard to break that behavior, for buyers. And that's why you have procurement offices. That's why all of a sudden, when you go through this process, all of a sudden you end up in procurement. What is procurement? Procurement really is getting down to the bare bones of, is this functional and does this work in the workflow? And is this a return on investment? And by the way, salespeople hate selling to procurement. Marketers hate marketing to procurement. Why? It's because they cut through everything and understand what is the cost, what is the problem, is it going to give us ROI, and how can I implement this software? So I think that when you look at these behaviors on the buyer and the seller side of things, if you're a salesperson out there or you're a founder out there and listening to this, you really have to understand both of the behaviors. It's if you're building to be a seller, you have to understand all the things that we just talked about. If you're a buyer, you really should be knowing how they're selling it. And as a seller, you really should be know how they buy it, because that's going to define your go-to-market strategy. So after you're understanding everything that's happened, all the problems you're trying to solve, the market opportunity, your revenue path, your customer journey, all those things, you probably should figure out how they buy them. Because if you might have built this most incredible technology solution, product, and process and marketing, shiny lure, all that stuff on the selling and building side of things, but you're not speaking to the buyer, or the buyer actually is not seeing the value on it, then you run into a challenge there, taking that to market.
You've got to understand the processes that take place inside organizations. And I mean, it's getting back to asking these basic questions. Okay, what problems exist? Who cares about it? Why do they care about it? And then, beyond all of that, and you get into the details, how do they actually go through their process? What is their purchasing process? If you know that procurement is going to get involved at some point, because most of the time they will, especially on enterprise deals, especially in markets where there's a lot of noise, then embrace procurement as a functional area in the process and do what you can to reduce friction in that aspect of the process. They have a certain job to do. If you understand their job, you can help them do that job better. And from what I've found, most people, if they help me do my job, I tend to like them a little bit better than the ones who are a pain in the butt. So
my favorite core value is, and I learned this from my career builder days. It was one of our core values. I'm not sure if we exactly lived it back then, but It was easy to do business with. So how can you be easy to do business with? And that one stuck with me over the years. And I'm just like, how do we reduce friction? How do you reduce buying friction? There's going to be friction throughout the whole entire process. And some of the best product-led companies in the world, like Slack and Google, have what's the other one? Jira, Atlassian. All those guys have created this extremely high level of product-led organizations. And how do you build that business? Well, you do that by reducing the amount of friction that it takes people to get into the product, to ensure to see what are the lightweight things that I need to understand that how this solves the problem. What are those enterprise features within the product that maybe I need now in the future, but maybe not now, or maybe I do need them. And then how do I actually purchase this and go through the process? And so for us, it really is a postal trying to reduce that amount of friction. And just because you have a free trial process on the front end doesn't mean that can't end up as an enterprise client. You're just reducing the friction. Before it was like, hey, let's set up this e-commerce purchasing process in the front end and we'll have everybody do self-serve and go through that. I look at the free trial process. I'm kind of going off a tangent, but this free trial process as being part of the marketing funnel. So it's like getting people into this free trial is really part of our marketing motion. And then it should absolutely involve your sales motion inside of that funnel once you get them in. And then, post you're then in your retention or your CS funnel. So how should you build your product and your solution to ensure that it is super easy to get in, to see value, and to purchase? I think that's where a lot of companies miss. And they really go back to the, hey, let's just do a lead form and push it over to sales. And then sales takes 2 days to respond. And, and then you've lost the person, the lead. So I really look at that ease to do business with and reducing friction as a main value proposition for our software and for softwares that I love. And that's what I'm doing here.
And you can design that into your system. So, think about the plumbing that comes into a house or comes into an office building or goes into any situation. Think about driving Southern California where the 405 and the 5 connect to each other. There's a bottleneck that creates some challenge and that creates more friction. And it's hard for it to be able to handle all of the capacity at the L Toro Y. But when you think of the plumbing that comes into your house, there's a couple of different things that you can do. If you know you're getting water to an area, you can increase capacity. You can increase the diameter of the piping. If you know that you need more pressure in another area, you can turn down the valve in some segment. And as you start to look at each of these connection points, each of these nodes in the process, you can start to figure out what is the challenge that's going to happen at that point of conversion where a decision needs to be made, and how can I reduce friction if I want people to accelerate, or in the right scenario, create friction so that they change behavior. And each of those are just design-oriented things that you think about as you go through the system. So if you're out there and you've not taken the time to map out, what does this customer journey look like? And a lot of people talk about customer journey, and some people will talk about buyer journey and customer journey, and they mix them together. But if you've not gone through this process and say, here's how people come in. They come in through some kind of a free trial. Then those people who come in through that free trial do some things. Those people who do these things tend to turn into people who do these other things. Those people who do these things turn into people who disappear. If we can't map those things out, then you're going to be at the risk of treating everybody like everybody. And then you've got the sales rep who takes 2 days to follow up with someone. And by the time they follow up, the person's already moved on. So you can solve for these things. It's a matter of going back through the process that Erik talked about earlier, which is just kind of saying, okay, what are my ideas? How can I get these things on paper? How can I start to figure out these things that I want to test for? How can I actually start seeing how people respond in the market? And I guess the way I would summarize that, don't overcomplicate this. Don't make it more difficult than it has to be. Be direct and deliberate in the way that you gather information. Is that fair?
Yeah, I do. I love your analogy for the plumbing. And for all those that didn't know plumbing, you now have a little lesson of how house plumbing goes in a home. It sounds like you've been through that process, Mike. So I will tell you that is a perfect analogy. And you would hope that the first thing that you build, you have just pipes. And there's it's tough to do this if you build a home, but just say you have pipes and you have just one level of pressure through this whole entire plumbing that you've built. because you're not going to know where things are failing until they actually fail. You're going to have an idea, and especially if you've done this a few times, you're going to know where those failure points are. But if you're a first-time CEO, or if you're going into an industry that might not have anything built for it, you're not going to know where those clogs are going to happen, and where you're going to need more, a bigger diameter thing, or you're going to need to increase the pressure in certain areas. It's a perfect analogy of actually how you should be managing your business. So I would say that don't build initially for those spots of challenge. Let it build up, not so it kills your business, but let the train hit you and figure out where you need to go. Because you need to get something to market to understand, is the plumbing even working? Or is there just like not a pipe there and it's just like going into the ground? You're not going to know until you get going on it. And sometimes pipes are going to break completely. And you're just going to be like, oh my God, that potentially has that could kill my business, right? That could absolutely kill my business. Like, a good example is that these challenges will pop up no matter where it's at. Today's day and age, it's crazy to see how many challenges have been popping up for entrepreneurs and for folks starting businesses. Number one, the challenge for us was, hey, is the postal service going to get defunded? Is there going to be a postal service anymore? And I was like, first off, that'll never happen. It's written into our constitution. Somebody's going to end up saving it. But the reality is that would be a major pipe breakage for us. If we're sending things that are in offline, one of our main logistics partners has now gone out of business. So what do you do there? Well, I mean, that obviously you should be looking at that as a major risk to the business, and you should identify your risks as you're going through that research ideation. And so I would say that there are things coming around. Don't let that train hit you. Let the little trains hit you, but make sure you're prepared for the big trains where it could potentially break the pipe completely.
The cool thing in the piping thing, and actually I learned everything I know about piping through Super Mario Brothers. So like it's not plumbing, but the cool thing about the piping is you can work your way backward on the chain and determine where you need to put redundancies in to help reduce your risk. But there's a period of time where you just don't know. And there's a point where you can have a catastrophic break. If the pipe leaning from the main line into your house breaks, you're going to be out of water for a period of time. So understand those things are going to happen. But as you work through this, start to visualize and start to figure out where are those areas where I'm okay with pressure and I'm okay with stress. One of the things that we wanted to get into today was this whole idea of going through different stages. So there's the 0 to 1 stage, and then there's this period where, okay, we've actually figured out something. We think we've got a pretty solid product market fit. We now need to go out and start hiring and building some scale, and we're going to break through a plateau. And then before you know it, now we need to optimize, and then there's going to be another plateau we got to break through. But can you talk through kind of your experience in each of those stages, and what are some of the challenges that people see either in that 0 to 1 post, or maybe it's the 5 to 20 something post, or the 20 to 25 to 100 post, whatever those posts are? How do you think about building businesses in each of these stages? Yeah.
So I will say one thing about this is that I think that this definition of, it's part of the company growth cycle. And like, you'll see the graphs of growth cycle, but I think that this has actually been brought up from VCs. So this is actually a VC made up thing. 0 to 1, 1 to 5, 5 to 20, 20 to 100. Those are VC based metrics on businesses to understand how much they should be giving them money, how much money they should be getting, and then where the revenue marks are. So let me just preface it that.
That's awesome.
Now, again, I will also preface that, is it different from getting to $1 million than it is getting from 50 to $100 million? Yes, it is different. But does the process that you go through need to be different in order to get there? I do not think so. I actually think your process of evaluating, what your targets are, how you need to get there, and then what you currently have, you go through the same exact thing. Okay, what's my problem right now? Okay, my problem is I want to be a $1 billion company. How do I get to a $1 billion company? Well, first I got to get to $1 million. Okay, let's get to $1 million in revenue if that's a milestone that you've hit. How do I get to $1 million without missing an opportunity to go to $1 billion even faster while getting, to $1 million? So the way that I work on this is, first off, you're just talking about scale and burn when you're really talking about the money that you have in the bank, or not at all when you're trying to go to $1 million. You're like, can I solve that this is a product market fit? Can I understand the ideation? Can I do the research? Can I hire the team? Can I build the product? Can I take it to market and solve and see some buying journey starting to happen? And is there value to that? Okay, that's really what I'm solving for and into the one. But it's not like you're not solving that in the future either. You're really just trying to move that goalpost. And then moving the goalpost, all you're really doing is putting more resources into that because you've solved for that. You raised money. Now you're taking that capital and your problems become, okay, how do I now scale this business? And how do I create these organizational departments that can take my vision and our product market fit and scale it? And some CEOs are like, dude, I want a piece after $1 million because that's just not my gig. Or some guys are like, hey, I'm good getting us up to like 100 employees and our 100 first customers. But, after that, I just don't know how to get a scaled organization internationally. Or maybe I just don't want that to be, I just want to go through that process because I'm more amped with that 0 to 1. So I will tell you that like there are different people that have expertise within those areas, but it really is, you have to set the business up to scale from day one, meaning that you have your 5-year plan and you understand how many resources it takes, how many clients you need in order to get to those revenue marks that you need to get to. And you just have to execute that plan. And I pride myself on being an executor. That is the thing that I believe that I can do very well is take a plan, take this to market and execute that plan. And so I've done this a few times and I will tell you that it doesn't really change. It just becomes bigger and bigger and bigger. But the way you got to your product market fit is the same way that you'll take other features to market, that you'll take other products to market, that you'll take international to market. It's the same exact process. So I would make sure that just because you're focused on your product market fit and get to $1 million, you're not going to be investable unless you can get to $50 million in revenue in the next 5 years. So don't pretend like, hey, this $1 million is where it stops. That's just proving the concept. Then after you get your funding, then it's like, hey, I'm going out there and I'm executing this $50 million plan. What do I need? Well, I need this much capital and I need this many resources and this many different product lines and this many locations, this many employees. And then you just execute that plan. And if it goes wrong, you just start from the beginning and, oh shit, I'm not, excuse my language. I'm not where I need to be. And what do I need to do? Well, I need to go back again and identify what are the challenges? What is plumbing? What plumbing is broken? Is it really the water source that the challenge is, or is it me? Is it the plumbing I built? And so, yeah, that was a bit of a rant on,
it was awesome
on how I think about that, but I don't see there being a big difference strategically on how you execute at these different levels. It's about what juices people the most and where they want to hang their hat on it. As a CEO there's a salesperson, as a founder, you hire a salesperson. Is that salesperson hanging their hat on getting you to the first $1 million or hanging your hat on getting you the first 20 million? And like, they're saying, hey, that's what I'm good at. That's probably like in their like resume, right? Everybody loves saying I got it from 0 to whatever. I love saying that too. I mean, I'm proud of the businesses I've built, but is that person going to get you to $100 million of revenue? You don't know. And that's a person problem. That's not like a process problem. That's just like the wrong person. By the way, when I say wrong person, they might have gotten you to 15 million. You love that person. And like, you wish you could have that person on to go forward with you, but they're just not the right person. And that's fine. As long as you're transparent with that and they're transparent with you, then that's the reality of things. You just got to move on. But yeah, that's the way I look at all this.
It's so important to look at that question around, do I have the right people? Like, is this the thing that they get excited about? Because functionally, and I really like how you put this, Erik, the mechanics are the same. Like, we're still solving problems. We're solving problems. We have a process that we go through to solve problems. We want to make sure we're focused on the right problems. If we're not focused on the right problems, we could be solving for something that nobody cares about or solving for the wrong thing and the market can pass us by. But functionally, there's a way that we go in and we solve problems. There are people who like to solve problems or the right people in those areas. And we talked about the plumbing analogy. I've got another one for you that I think you might like and beat it down if you don't. But I think about this in the context of, when I was a kid, I had a rubber band airplane, and that rubber band airplane was made of like balsa wood and a rubber band, a little propeller, but I could spin it up really tight, create some tension, and it would move through time and space.
Oh, cool.
Then at some point in time, you graduate from the rubber band airplane and it's like, I want something with more pieces that moves a little bit faster, and maybe it's a remote control airplane. And then
Yeah.
you move to something that could actually move a person, like an ultralight, and it has more pieces and the risk gets a little bit higher. And then you move to a Cessna, and then you move to a jet airplane, and then you move to this giant rocket that's going to get us from here to Mars. One challenge is a lot of people will read books about how the rocket works and they want to get to Mars, but they haven't even figured out how to make the rubber band airplane work. And they just want to jump too far ahead. And you want to just slow them down. You want to just say, look, you'll get there. We can get there. But let's first get the mechanics in place and just demonstrate that we can actually move through time and space. Then we can move through time and space with other people and we can do it with speed. So what do you think?
Mm-hmm.
Good?
I love that, man. That's really good. Yeah. No, I mean, everybody wants to be a rocket man, right? Everybody wants to be on Mars. Everybody wants to be Elon Musk. I mean, why wouldn't you? He's a multi-billionaire. He's sending people to space. He's creating neural nets in your mind and connecting computers to your brain and, creating a massive solar infrastructure to save the world. Like, you want to be Elon Musk, but how does Elon Musk become Elon Musk? Well, he starts off as a kid taking apart computers and building airplanes, And so I think that's a really interesting take on it. And I think the main takeaway from that is, by the way, again, we're going to go to the shiny lure and the functional piece of it. There's no reason why you can't act like a rocket physicist or an Elon Musk. There's no reason why you can't have the confidence that you are this person, because people are drawn to that confidence and drawn to that, like, they believe you can get there. They might not see you there right now, but they believe you can get there. And they'll support you to make it easier on that path to get to where you need to be. You see that a lot in politics. That being said, you still need that functional expertise that in order to get to where you need to go. And so, I look at that from an entrepreneurial standpoint. I am now building $1 billion company. That is what Postal is going to be. It's either going to be zero or it's going to be $1 billion. And I talk about valuation standpoint. The money is out there. Our market is out there. We know we have superior technology and we have a great team to do it. We believe that we can build this. Now, people should believe that from me when I say that, because I've done this now 4 times before and I can see these $1 billion companies being made. Now, Reich was the $1 billion company that I was with that in leading sales. The other 2 were successful, but they were like $100 million exits, right? So, which is still crazy, but it was like, those weren't $1 billion companies, $1 billion exits. So that is my story and why I'm trying to get to that. But the thing is, like, if you are starting a company, it's your first one, and you might have gotten into a situation to where you have $1 billion opportunity and people are telling you have $1 billion opportunity, you believe this, but you got to surround yourself with people that have the experience of getting to that $1 billion, because you will never make it. Even if you are the flashiest dude or gal ever, and they're just like, everybody believes in you, you're going to fail. You're going to fail if you don't surround yourself with the right people at the right times through that journey. So
why do people struggle with surrounding themselves with the right people?
Because people are egomaniacs. Generally, founders are egomaniacs. So if you have an idea, and this is your baby, and I feel that all the time, like, God, this is my baby. This is my baby. I love this company. I love the people that we've hired. I love our customers and our partners. And it's like, this is mine. This is mine. But after a couple of these, you're just like, no, man, this is ours. You have to start using the language ours. This is we. And some companies do that really well, and founders do that really well, where they're like, no, this is we, and I now need to surround us with the right people to get us to where we need to be. And other founders will say that, and they actually don't do that effectively. A perfect example is WeWork. If anybody hasn't listened to We Crashed yet, that is one of the most fantastic podcasts. And it tells the story of how Adam Neumann was a genius and had created this incredible platform and company that was helping companies become remote and have pods and, scale the office space, for startups and all this amazing, we theme. And at the end of the day, it was just about him. And it was just about his ego and feeding his ego and him being successful. And ultimately he made out. He made out, and I don't fault him for it. You don't hate the player, hate the game, right? The game got it wrong. Like, Adam got it right, and he's sitting in Israel right now, or maybe in New York, with his $1 billion plus, and he's stoked. Now, I still think that WeWork has the next story to go in, but the reason why it has the next story and why I think it's still going to be extremely relevant is that it's now got people running the business that actually are we people, that actually are more aligned with how to scale a business with people who have expertise in different areas that can scale it. So I think that you got to take stories of like where these things have happened and been massively failures, and then making sure that you don't do that. And for me, it has everything to do with creating core values, bringing people in that have those core values, ensuring I know that I'm building my advisor network around me of the things that I know that I'm soft on, having co-founders that fill in the gaps of where you have challenges. And I would suggest anybody who is a more product or sales focused CEO, you need to bring in a technical co-founder that is equal to you. My co-founder Jed and I, this will be our second business. I mean, we were buddies before these two business ventures, and we decided to work together. And there was never a point in time where I was like, hey, I got this idea, and I want you to come run engineering and run the technical side of things. I said, man, do you want to be my partner on this? Like, let's go 50-50 on this thing, right? And even though it was my idea and whatever, it doesn't matter, because I know that I would never get to where I needed to be without him. And I think that it goes vice versa. I think that he understood that if we go out and do this and he spends the next 5-10 years of his life working on these projects, that Erik could actually make it happen. So you got to find people that actually can create that atmosphere for you and make sure they're in the boat with you.
It is so important, the questions we ask each other and the level of transparency we have with each other, and being comfortable and telling people, hey, you know what? I'm not the right fit. This is not what I'm interested in doing, rather than buying into the idea and saying, you know what? Yeah, I think this is okay. And I want to be a part of it. And I don't want to let someone down because I want to help them do it. Like, we've got to be authentic, be transparent, say no, because you're going to go through some dark, rough times. And if you're not prepared to go through those dark, rough times, you're going to create more damage than it's worth. Erik, this has been absolutely awesome. I have thoroughly enjoyed the conversation. Where can people find out more about what you're working on and Postal, and connect with you if they'd like to?
Yeah, so I'm active on LinkedIn. Postal's active on LinkedIn as well. All of our buyers are there. So that's where we put our flashy, shiny lure out at. And you can come to postal.io to take a look at the platform. It's, again, we took out the challenges of getting signed up and that friction. So you can try the product for free and get using it if you have any challenges around how you manage all of your offline engagement and how to do that. So we'd be happy to help you on that side of things. But I'm always happy to help anybody who hits me on LinkedIn as well.
So we'll include links in the show notes. It's awesome and fascinating that you are selling in general to people who are enabling sales in organizations and enabling revenue generation inside an ecosystem where all there are shiny lures. And it just seems like more and more shiny lures keep popping up.
Yeah. And getting funded as well.
Which is awesome. Erik, thank you again for the time.
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to another great episode. Make sure you check out the links in the show notes. If you know someone who'd benefit from hearing this discussion, please share it with them and let us know via Twitter or LinkedIn. I'd like to hear how you are applying the lessons learned and concepts discussed in your role today. Sales is a thinking process. How are you thinking differently about yours?